ideas, what you consume influences who you become. On the Mind and Matter podcast, we learn together from the best scientists and thinkers alive today about how your mind-body reacts to what you feed it. Before starting Mind and Matter, I spent 10 years in academia doing scientific research. I got a PhD in neuroscience where I focused on neuroendocrinology and the neurobiology of behavior, and before that, I specialized in molecular, developmental, and evolutionary genetics. I use my scientific background to help parse and translate the information that guests share on the podcast. In addition to the podcast, I write long-form written content inspired by the show where I integrate what I've learned across episodes. I also have a free weekly newsletter where I provide you with upcoming guests, share links, and provide commentary on scientific studies and research that I'm reading, and more. Visit mindandmatter.substack.com to find all of my content. You are about to listen to the full episode, but there will be 1 to 2 short ads immediately following this before the conversation. If you would like to hear ad-free episodes and get early access before they release more widely, become a paid subscriber at the Mind and Matter Substack at mindandmatter.substack.com. Becoming a paid subscriber is a way to directly support my efforts, allowing me to make more episodes and higher quality episodes, and also helping to free up my time so that I can spend more of it on doing research and synthesizing results from the podcast and from the literature so that I can do more things like writing on the Substack, putting more content into the newsletter, and getting these things out more frequently. So if you want to support the show and get ad-free episodes, go to mindandmatter.substack.com. If you like to read like I do, then you should check out the ReadWise app. It's totally free to download, and if you go through the link in the episode description or on my support page, you can get a free 60-day trial for zero cost. ReadWise is a really cool app that allows you to import digital highlights from over 30 different platforms such as Kindle, iBooks, PDFs, and more. It makes it really easy for you to review and find and share excerpts and quotes from whatever it is that you're reading, whether it's PDFs of scientific papers or books that you're reading on your Kindle, and you can even save and use highlights from physical books. I read a lot of physical books before bed, for example, or when I'm traveling, and the ReadWise app actually integrates with the camera on your phone so that you can take a photo of a page that you're reading, highlight a specific chunk of text from that page, and export it to the app so that you can reference it or find it or share it later. They even allow you to export really cool looking graphics of some of the highlights that you have in the books or the papers you're reading so that you can share them in an engaging way. So check out the ReadWise app today if you are a reader and you like to reference and organize what you read. Go through the link in the episode description or on my support page or in my free weekly newsletter at mindandmatter.substack.com and try the ReadWise app 60 days free today.
It's great to be back.
How much do you remember of the last conversation we had?
I think I remember we talked about magic mushrooms and the different molecules inside of magic mushrooms, but I confess I maybe only listened to the podcast once a few years ago.
Yeah, I was driving here. So I live in Seattle. I'm now at your office, which is like a 20-minute drive away. And I was listening to I put on our first episode to kind of jog my memory. And I was getting really into it, and I missed the exit. And I was almost going to be late. But we talked about the stuff you work on. We talked about cannabis stuff, which is the world we both came from.
Right.
And, we talked about who you are and all that stuff. We don't need to go into like all the details that we went into last time about your background. But nonetheless, why don't you just tell people a little bit about who you are and your background, because it is so interesting and unique.
Cool. Be happy to. So my name's Andr Chadeayne, and I went to undergrad at Princeton University, where I started studying neuroscience, focused on addiction and reward through opiate systems. And I very quickly got interested in the molecules that are underlying the chemical processes in the brain. So I actually graduated from Princeton with a degree in chemistry in 2001. And went on to get a PhD in chemistry at Cornell after that, doing very academic, rigorous chemical studies with Peter T. Wolzanski, who has a reputation for leaving no stone unturned when it comes to chemical questions. From there, I transitioned into the law, largely because I was nowhere near as smart as my PI, Pete Wolzanski, and thought that I could never make it as a chemical professor. So transitioned into the law, where I was actually a relatively intelligent chemist. I went to a law firm called Finnegan Henderson, and concurrently went to law school at George Washington, studying patent law by night and practicing patent law by day. After finishing law school, I left corporate law and started a startup company based on a natural product called Swim Spray. It was a vitamin C product, which I still to this day think is the only stable aqueous solution of vitamin C. It was something that was very hard to do, and we used it to get chlorine off of swimmers' hair and skin. That didn't make any money at the time, so back then I was looking for a way to support myself, and started a patent law firm. That went very well, and several years into running the patent firm, I had a client called Ebu, and this is where my path crosses cannabis. At Ebu, we looked at the cannabis plant, taking it apart, looking at the individual molecules, what they do alone, what they do in combination, and of course, as the chemical patent guy, we were taking advantage of the patent system to make sure that we captured all the innovation for everything that we were doing in the laboratory. I think, 5 or 7 years ago, we sold Ebu, and I was left in a position to pretty much find something else to do, and with the good fortune of kind of being able to do whatever I wanted at the time. And here in the Pacific Northwest, and in my lawn at the time were these little mushrooms, magic mushrooms, growing around, and the lore there was that psilocybin was the psychoactive component of the magic mushrooms. Having just come from cannabis, where the attention has moved from THC to the other interesting molecules in the plant, I started wondering whether it was just psilocybin, and quickly learned that it wasn't psilocybin, but that psilocybin was a prodrug of the active psilocin, and then over the years found that there were some other molecules in the mushrooms that may also be quite important to the psychoactive properties. And Nick, I know that you've had Dirk Hoffmeister on the show. He's a very valuable collaborator of ours who I consider to be the world's expert in this area. And I think we'll have a paper coming out this month that has some new molecules in magic mushrooms that hadn't been discovered before.
And can you talk about that at all? Is it already in the publication pipeline?
I can tell you what I know because I actually don't remember the specifics. I was early on and just reviewed the paper and whatnot, but I don't have the specifics in mind. But the punchline is that the magic mushrooms, all the magic mushrooms, which are sort of used synonymously with the word psilocybin, have a lot of other molecules in there, not just close structural analogs of psilocybin, like baeocystin, psilocin, norpsilocin, so on and so forth, but Hoffmeister's lab also discovered a whole host of beta-carboline molecules, which are actually monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So if you think about the way psilocin and psilocybin and whatnot get degraded in the body, monoamine oxidase inhibitors shut down that degradation pathway. So it's interesting that the magic mushrooms themselves have, albeit in low quantities, the very molecule that inhibits the enzyme that breaks down the active molecule.
So MAOIs, this is literally, these are the old school antidepressants, and this would be why you would never want, that's why, partly why those drugs were so dangerous and tricky, because they can have effects like this.
Absolutely. It's also why some drugs you don't take with grapefruit juice, which has natural monoamine oxidase inhibitors. And then if we want to bring this back around to psychedelics, ayahuasca. DMT is the active molecule in ayahuasca, a serotonin 2A drug, but it's not orally active because it gets degraded too quickly by monoamine oxidase. And so the ancient preparations blend the plant that has the DMT in it with one that has a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, and then the drug is orally active over the course of hours, whereas pure DMT is only active for 10 minutes or so. Yeah,
and a lot of people don't realize that things like grapefruit can have things like MAOIs in them. What we would otherwise call a drug, literally, can be in food like that. And yeah, my understanding is that grapefruit actually has quite a bit of some MAOI or another, and this does cause people problems if they don't take that into account.
Yes, I don't remember the name of the molecule, but there are certain prescription drugs that will have on the packaging or a sticker, don't take this with grapefruit juice, which is kind of funny to see. Don't eat this food with your drug.
Right. Interesting. So you've done a lot of work on psychedelic chemistry, playing around with the chemical structure of things like psilocybin and other compounds. Before getting into some of the specifics of the things you're working on, like bird's eye view, what are you doing at your startup? What is the startup? Are you guys trying to tweak psychedelic molecules in order to create better pharmaceutical drugs? Like, what would you say you do in terms of what the company is trying to achieve?
Oh, that is a great question. And I need to start by saying that it changes, right? When we first raised Series A money for CaaMTech, I don't know how many years ago, you could basically raise money by spelling the word psychedelic in your pitch deck. And so the race there was to get into drug development as quickly as possible and as advanced into drug development as quickly as possible. That climate has changed significantly. It's very hard to raise money for psychedelic science, especially, I think, clinical trials. And I think that's largely because everybody's kind of standing around waiting to see what happens to compass pathways and psilocybin and whether psychedelic drugs will actually become a thing. There's this big question as to how you would commercialize it or get it to the patient, and everybody's sort of waiting. So
basically, Compass Pathways, that would be one of the major companies out there trying to turn a psychedelic like psilocybin into a biopharmaceutical entity that they can ultimately make money from. And you're saying that basically the investor environment out there has shifted. People are waiting to see if Compass will actually be successful, and therefore whether psychedelics will be a fruitful investment in general. And it might turn out that way, it might not turn out that way. So the environment, the business environment has changed. It's not as exuberant as it was maybe a couple of years ago.
Yes, I think that's fair to say. I have a good friend and colleague who said that good markets bring the future closer. And so when there was a lot of money in the psychedelic space, the future became a lot closer, and everyone focused on and rushed towards these clinical trials. The biotech market has certainly contracted a bit, and it's a slightly tougher time now, I would say. And as a result, I think that there's a lot less enthusiasm for racing towards risky clinical trials before somebody does the de-risking work for us.
Yeah. And so you've got this interesting background as a chemist/scientist, and also a patent lawyer, and also a startup CEO. And so you've got scientific knowledge, you've got legal and regulatory knowledge, you've got an interesting sort of bouquet of expertise here. What's your general sense? What's your intuition on whether a company like Compass Pathways will be successful, both in terms of, do you think psilocybin as they're using it will work in a therapeutic sense? And then from a regulatory legal standpoint, do you think this will get approval and check all the boxes it needs to check? What's your sense?
The answer there is I've had quite an education over the last several years, and I'll start by saying I think scientifically, psilocybin's an amazing molecule. I think it has tremendous potential for helping all sorts of people with all sorts of things. A tool for, if used correctly, a tool for really reevaluating your life and making connections that you might not have made before, so that within a very short period of time, you come out of your trip really a new person with a new outlook on wanting to be a better person. The sad part of this story is that the commercial and regulatory realities for bringing that molecule to the masses, are not entirely consistent with the benefit that it could provide to society. Meaning that presently there's a lot of concern, or the psychedelic industry, I think, is held up understanding whether pharmaceutical companies can make money, or nicer stated, recover their investment delivering psilocybin to a patient. What does that look like? Is there a way that psilocybin can be delivered to a patient that insurance companies will pay for, that makes sense in terms of the costs and the reimbursements and the patient population, et cetera? And those sorts of realities, I think, are what's really determining whether psilocybin is successful at this point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And where are we? Where is the industry in that process? What sort of phase of trials is Compass at, and what does the approximate timeline here look like?
Compass is in phase 3, and in terms of process, I think we're all sitting around waiting to hear, hopefully, the good news.
Yeah. So phase 3, that means these are going to be large trials, lots of people, and in some sense, the phase 3 are sort of the biggest, most important, most expensive, and consequential phase of the drug development process, right?
Yes, and you just hit on the distinction again, in that, yes, that's the most important, most expensive, get across the finish line phase in terms of making a commercial drug product. For my money, phase 1's pretty important because that's like, is this safe to give to a person? And then probably even before phase 1, you have a pretty good idea as to whether it's going to be useful as a drug. So if you're picking up what I'm saying, there's a lot of energy and regulatory and expensive stuff that goes on for something that you know is going to be a good drug. And so it's not every good drug that makes it across the finish line, and it's not everything that makes it across the finish line that's a good drug.
Right. Yeah, I think, if anyone's been paying attention to the last, I don't know, several decades of drug development, there's many examples that cut both ways there. Lots of drugs have gotten approved that turn out to be, nasty in different ways or not nearly as good as we expected, and lots of potentially great drugs never make it.
Yes, agreed. It's I like to think, and what helps me sleep at night is that everybody's doing their best.
Okay, so that's psilocybin. One of the things that a lot of people has captured the attention of a lot of people is, can we make new kinds of psychedelic drug derivatives, things that retain therapeutic potential that the other ones have, but subtract out the hallucinogenic properties, say, which some people think of as side effects. It's certainly convenient to create a drug that has the same kind of therapeutic punch, but doesn't require adult supervision for a 6-hour trip, things like this. There's also there's a lot of chemical work that I think you and others are doing, just moving atoms around molecules and saying, okay, well, how are these affecting animals? Can we develop drugs that have new therapeutic properties, not necessarily the same therapeutic properties as psilocybin minus the hallucinogenic effects, potentially even brand new properties? There's a lot of room to play there, I think, from a chemical perspective and a drug development perspective. Can you start to give us a sense for how you guys at CaaMTech are playing in that space and what you're doing?
Oh, absolutely. I like that you use the word play, because that has been largely the approach, in that every week CaaMTech has a science party. That's the name of the meeting. It is an optional meeting for our scientific collaborators. And Nick, you would, as a scientist, you'd be invited if you wanted to check it out. And we basically have a rule that without any focus on anything commercial or patent related or anything like that, what scientific questions need to be answered, and with new scientific results, what other interesting questions are percolating to the surface. And so we've been doing that for, I think, 7 years. And over the course of those 7 years, we've stumbled upon some really interesting results. And then, you would know as well as anyone that each interesting result breeds really a whole new area of investigation and a whole series of other questions. And so to give you a couple of examples, and we'll start with psilocybin. Psilocybin is a prodrug of the active molecule psilocin. It turns out it's a pretty lousy prodrug in terms of being a drug. It's not very bioavailable. That group that gets hydrolyzed is hard to make in a synthetic molecule, and it's also
just for people listening. So psilocybin, we often say the word psilocybin when actually we're referring to psilocin, the active psychedelic compound in mushrooms. Prodrug means psilocybin is the precursor to psilocin. It has to be metabolized in a certain way before the active form is made. And then with all that in mind, we still sort of just use psilocybin as like a catch-all term. Is that accurate?
Very accurate. And the worst part of it, or at least my least favorite part of it, because I love chemical precision, people will use the word psilocybin to mean the mushrooms, whereas the mushrooms are actually like a biological cocktail of lots and lots of molecules, more and more every day. So to call that psilocybin while you're also calling a pure molecule psilocybin, same kind of mistake.
So talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been playing around with chemically in terms of, changing the psilocybin molecule, creating new drugs. What does that process look like? And what are some of the interesting candidates here and what they might be doing in animal models, say?
Sure. So you're gonna have to picture it in your head, sort of the molecule psilocin, right? Because again, psilocybin is a prodrug and it's inactive. With the molecule psilocin, first of all, I'll start with prodrugs. You can make an infinite number of other prodrugs of psilocin. So instead of psilocybin, which I've already told you is a pretty lousy prodrug, you can make all sorts of other prodrugs that have different solubilities and release or metabolize into psilocin at different rates, whether you want to be faster or slower. Prodrugs that get into the blood before they get hydrolyzed into psilocin, or those that don't. A whole area of investigation there.
So you can essentially make faster and shorter acting psilocin.
Absolutely. Like we can reduce the duration of a psilocybin experience down from about 6 hours to about 4 hours just by altering the prodrug.
I see. So you're not creating a psychedelic derivative in this case where you're subtracting out the hallucinogenic effects but trying to retain everything else. You're just sort of turning down the dial on the hallucinogenic effects, but it's still a psychedelic compound.
Oh, no, I'm saying exact same psychedelic effects.
Wow.
Exact same molecule, psilocin, that's your active molecule. But instead of getting to that molecule from the prodrug psilocybin, you can get to that molecule from a different prodrug.
Similar intensity of the subjective effects, just shorter duration?
Same active molecule circulating in your blood, reacting with the same receptors in the same way.
Wow! So it's like a kinetic thing. You're just
Yes.
It's affecting how quickly
Yes.
the drug is getting into your brain and circulating and going out. Basically.
Yes, and if you wanna go and connect that to some sort of commercial driving force, if it's a 4-hour experience instead of a 6-hour experience, maybe this patient is in the clinic for a more manageable amount of time that allows or comports with like the length of a shift in a medical clinic, and rather than requiring folks to be at the clinic for 10 or 12 hours.
So it turns out that the biology and the chemistry here are such that we're not going to be forced to make some absolute decision on, do we want to separate the hallucinations from the therapeutic benefits? We can actually create the drug in a way that psilocin is just, it's still inside of you and you're having a shorter duration trip. So even if it turned out that you can't separate the therapeutic side from the psychedelic side, we still have this kind of chemical tunability that can make it a more manageable drug to be administered in a clinical setting.
Yes, absolutely. And in terms of modifying psilocybin or psilocin, this is probably the smallest possible way that we could modify it, right? Because we're literally administering the exact same active drug, just giving it to you a little bit differently. And with that, there's already a huge swing in effects and an enormous area of investigation before we start going and chopping the molecule up and making really big changes.
Wow. And so how do you actually do all this work? Are you, like through CaaMTech, are you working with scientists in academic labs to run animal trials, then turn into human work down the road? How does that actually happen?
So again, the rule is science governs, right? So science party, what questions we want to answer, and how are we going to go and do that? Yes, it's almost all academic science. So we have scientific collaborations with universities where we're really an excellent funding source. We've been told that we are the easiest money to get in terms of, would you rather apply for a grant to do the same work with NSF, or would you like to do it with us? We're a great partner in that way, especially because we like publishing, and we don't let the commercial tail wag the dog. So it's pretty much all an academic collaboration between 7 or 8 labs at this point. And as it continues to kind of gather momentum, I think we're attracting more and more talent because we're doing really good work.
Yeah. So literally, you've got a startup, you've raised a bunch of money, you use some of that money to pay scientists to do the science that they would otherwise be doing by applying for an NIH grant or something. It enables them to do the science they want to do, that they love, to get the money they need to do it, but in a faster and more efficient way.
Yes, I think that's fair. Another way that somebody has described it to me that I liked was basically using patent expertise to create IP or assets that are attractive to investors who give us money that we can then hand to the scientists that help us kind of fill out the intellectual property. And around it goes, where Scientists can just be themselves.
Yeah.
And if we can capture the innovation in a way that, allows us to make it attractive for investment, we can kind of make it much easier for people to invest in science.
Yeah. I mean, I love that just setup that this is happening this way because, as someone, as a former practicing scientist who then went into the private sector, you can just see firsthand when you don't have that kind of separation of church and state and you're in a company that's doing science for a commercial purpose, the science itself can quickly and easily become contaminated.
I agree. And we do some of it. We have to, right? Because we're a business and we have investors to answer to, and we can't say that we're just having a great big science party without any pursuit of commercial goals. So there'll be gaps, right? There'll be gaps where there's some work that I wouldn't ask my scientists to do because they don't want to do it because they don't think it's interesting. That's I don't want to beneath them maybe philosophically, but and that's where thankfully we have money and we can use the money to have a contract research organization fill in those gaps.
Yeah.
What's also awesome there is that a lot of the time we fill in the boring science with the commercial research organization, and then find out that there's something interesting there, and then we've got the academics all fired up again.
Okay, interesting. So what sort of general areas are you working on in terms of the applications for some of the new molecules you've created? You've given us one example. You've basically created a different version of psilocin, these prodrugs that turn into psilocin that enable us to administer psilocin to human beings, but the trip will be shorter. And so, that's of obvious value because then it's just a more manageable thing. What about some of the other new types of drugs that you guys have created or discovered and, that might have sort of applications that go beyond what psilocybin, we think psilocybin can do?
Sure. So I'll start by saying that, I think it'll all, using psilocybin as the reference point, they're all going to vary in degrees from psilocybin or psilocin. So,
Yep.
I mean, like I said, making a different prodrug of a prodrug, that's probably the, least exciting thing we can do. Starting to mess with other parts of the molecules, becomes more interesting because the differences are greater. So I'll start by saying that psilocin is a 4-hydroxy, it has a dimethyltryptamine. So there's 2 methyl groups on the nitrogen atom. Alexander Shulgin, a long time ago, started changing those methyl groups into other alkyl groups, methyl to ethyl, propyl, so on and so forth. So that's one area of exploration, is to play with sort of that part of the molecule. A lesser studied place to mess around with is the 4-hydroxy group. Instead of making that a hydroxy group or a prodrug group, to put alkyl groups or something else there. And there was some work by Kazel et al. In, I think, 2023, showing that changing that hydroxy group to a methoxy group dramatically changes those molecules' properties in terms of binding to the serotonin transporter. That unlike psilocin, which isn't an important molecule for binding to the serotonin transporter, changing that hydroxy to a methoxy group will cause it to bond to the serotonin transporter, as opposed to just the serotonin 2A molecule, which is what makes psilocin famous.
Yeah. Interesting. And so how many different academic research collaborations did you say you have? Like ballpark?
I'm embarrassed I don't know the exact number. I'd say maybe 8.
Yeah.
And then those are labs, right? So
Yeah,
at each lab, there's a handful of students and postdocs working on the projects.
Wow. Yeah. So it's just, you have all these collaborations. Each lab probably has a different sort of domain of expertise and focus. And you get to work on all these different but related problems in terms of, the focus areas, what you're trying to treat, what you're characterizing, and so forth.
Yes. And again, largely follow your nose, right? And I think that's a good way to go about science, without too much of an agenda, chase the results that you're guided to.
Yeah. What's an example you can give us of something that you guys have stumbled into that you didn't plan on ahead of time that's looking really interesting and potentially fruitful?
Oh, geez, I just gave you one. Changing the molecule at that psilocin at that 4 position from a hydroxy to a methoxy group, and seeing how that changes the serotonin transporter activity. That was one.
Yeah.
I mean, there was, one or two results there. And then, when you get a specific result, I tend to try to generalize it, right? So, wow, does that work for every 4-hydroxytryptamine? So like, Shulgin made a bunch of 4-hydroxytryptamines. Is this unique to psilocin, or if we, make an alkoxy group there, does it always, shifted over into the serotonin transporter land? Another question that came out of those results was, what if instead of a methoxy, it's an ethoxy or a propoxy or an isopropoxy?
Right.
So on and so forth. And now you can see how that blows up in all sorts of directions until ultimately, and I can't give you the punchline yet because my collaborator, Grant Glatfelter would murder me, because the paper's not out yet. But those are the areas that you can look at. And then when you look at a lot of examples from each of those areas, then you can come up with kind of a rule that all the molecules fit, and you can kind of understand it.
Mm-hmm. Are you guys pursuing at all? So a lot of people are pursuing, as I mentioned earlier, this quest to create psychedelic derivatives that have therapeutic potential but don't have hallucinogenic effects. Are you guys doing that at all? And have you, found any good candidates?
Let's see, at CaaMTech, that's a big topic. Let me think how to address that. So for one, we absolutely have serotonin 2A agonists, which is what all these psychedelic molecules, that's what everybody's excited about them for. We have drugs with that showpiece property that do not cause the head twitch response in mice, and the head twitch response is the gold standard for whether or not a person would have a psychedelic experience. And so that's been one area of study for us. Some of those molecules that we have that are 2A agonists that don't do the head twitch response, and speaking of things that lead to whole areas of investigation, we figured out that the reason for that is that they don't cross the blood-brain barrier. So a great example there is norpsilocin. And of course, and now you see how these overlap. We made a whole bunch of prodrugs of norpsilocin.
Yep.
And if you administer norpsilocin to a laboratory animal, or you can do studies on human tissues, it's a full serotonin 2A agonist, so even stronger than psilocin, but no head twitch response, and that's because it's not getting into the central nervous system. It's not getting into the brain where the head twitch response would be brought about, and so administering norpsilocin to a person would not cause them to have a psychedelic experience.
Okay, so it's still binding the 2A receptor, the so-called psychedelic serotonin receptor, but the reason it's not having hallucinogenic effects is it doesn't actually get into the brain because it can't cross the blood-brain barrier.
That's our conclusion. Of course, you have to preface this with in science, you're always at the whim of kind of like one experimental result. Like everything can fall out from under you when somebody has one result.
Yeah.
But for norpsilocin, we're pretty sure that the explanation to the serotonin 2A agonism and lack of HTR is that it's not getting into the central nervous system.
Yeah. And so this proxy behavior we have for hallucinogenic activity, the head twitch response in animals, everything that we know is psychedelic or hallucinogenic in humans. If you give it to a mouse, in just about every case, they'll have this head twitch response. And so there's a really nice correlation there. And we have this behavioral readout we can use in animals to assess whether something is likely going to be hallucinogenic in humans when we say create a new drug. Has anyone taken a drug that does not create the head twitch response in a mouse and does have 2A receptor activity or whatever, and then given it to humans and confirmed that it's a bona fide non-psychedelic or non-hallucinogenic compound, or are we still waiting on that?
I think that there are a handful of examples where there are drugs that people have taken that are serotonin 2A agonists and not HTR active. There are a handful of examples confirming that correlation. So that nothing's perfect, right? But the head twitch response seems to be a very, very good indicator of whether a drug would be psychedelic in a person. Of course, then the area of study that becomes super interesting is where are the exceptions? And I think there are a couple of sort of fringe cases there. I think bromo LSD and glyceride might be 2A agonists with no HTR that if a person takes them, they might feel something, but what are they really feeling?
Yeah. Okay, so these are LSD-like compounds.
Right. And then there are some molecules out of the ibogaine plant, I think, that are still also not very well explained. I think TBG might be one of them. I'm doing this from memory, so forgive me here. But David Olson and his lab have studied a bunch of molecules that have some 2A activity and no HTR. So 2A without the psychedelic effect. Our labs have reproduced some of that data, and we're still sort of struggling to find an explanation that it explains everything. Those molecules, nothing's ever just 2A or not 2A.
Right.
So there's other pharmacology in there that could explain a lack of head twitch response. For example, serotonin 1A activity can often mask it. And I think if I remember correctly, in the case of David Olson's compounds, the dose, in some of the data points was awfully high. And there won't be HTR at high doses for most psychedelics because you've basically zonked.
Right.
Yeah.
At some point, you're tripping so hard, the little mouse trip. Yeah.
Serotonin syndrome.
Serotonin syndrome. Explain what that is for people and what some of the risks there can be from high dose psychedelics.
I'm not an expert on serotonin syndrome per se, but overstimulation of that system and overstimulation of that receptor can lead to, in animals, basically a lack of activity, right? So let's use that example. As I continue to give higher and higher doses of a classic psychedelic, the animal is going to do the head twitch response more. Shake its head more.
It's tripping harder, quote unquote.
It is, yeah. But then just like an upside down U, the letter U, you'll get to a point where it starts to go down again to where you don't have any HTR anymore, no more head twitch response, and that's because you're flooding that system or hitting that button so hard that the animal is comatose or shut down in this serotonin syndrome-like state.
Yeah. This would be another reason why, like, playing around with MAOIs in conjunction with these and other drugs can be so dangerous.
Yes, I mean, with any of this stuff, you ought to know what you're doing,
right?
Which is why, I've always said for folks, look into this stuff. Like magic mushrooms is an area that's been pretty well studied for thousands of years. And, those are pretty good drugs for people. It'd be nice to get those to more people.
Yeah. And psilocybin, I mean, as you mentioned, it's been around for a long time. A lot of people have eaten a lot of mushrooms in different contexts. And there's a lot of lore out there when it comes to this stuff. You see this in cannabis as well, right?
Yes.
People create lore when they don't have a full understanding of like the underlying mechanics for how things work. And it's really interesting, as just sort of like a cultural and linguistic phenomenon and a social phenomenon. So as the psilocybin chemistry guy, with all the knowledge you have and all the research you've done, what's some lore around psilocybin and magic mushrooms that you've either confirmed or shown isn't true?
Oh man, there's a lot of really cool things there. So I mean, we already touched on, it's just psilocybin. Mm-hmm. It's not just psilocybin. There's other psychoactive molecules in there for sure. In terms of like the user experience, one thing that continues to fascinate, I got two things that continue to fascinate me there. One is, akin to cannabis, do different strains of magic mushrooms really produce different effects?
Right.
If you go on the internet to the magic mushroom people, absolutely, these are, more vivid, more, internal, more introspective, more colorful.
People will talk about pure visual experiences with no emotional cognitive disturbance and all the different permutations of what a trip can look like.
Exactly. I put this under the umbrella of the entourage effect. And again, we've been working at this at Science Party, and in particular with Dirk Hoffmeister, because as the chemist, if there's a different effect in this mushroom versus this mushroom, it has to be because of the molecules, right? I think that I can't come up with anyone that would disagree with that. And so then the question is, if I'm taking mushroom A and I'm getting reliably this experience, and then I take mushroom B and I get reliably this experience, that difference has to be explained by some sort of chemical difference. And so what is it?
Yeah.
I don't have the answer, so sorry about that, because we're still trying to... What you have to do is you have to catalog the chemical composition of different kinds of magic mushrooms reliably and then correlate that with differences in effect for quantifiably the same batches of mushrooms.
Right.
But it's a cool topic.
Yeah.
I really like that one.
Yeah. Well, another one that you see come up a lot for mushrooms and for other things is people come up with little tricks to alter the potency, or so they think. So with mushrooms, I remember a younger version of myself, and people would say, oh, you put your mushrooms into orange juice or something like that, and this brings out the psilocybin, or it makes it more potent somehow. Where does that come from, and what do we know about that?
Lemon juice. Yeah. Oh, I love this one. And this one I can tell you the answer. It's called lemon tekking. The lore is that you take your magic mushrooms, and again, in the magic mushrooms, you have psilocybin, right, which is this prodrug, and it gets converted into psilocin. The lore is that you blend up your magic mushrooms in lemon juice, and the lemon juice, everyone will tell you, has a low pH. And by virtue of this low pH, the 4-phosphate ester of psilocybin gets hydrolyzed or gets converted into psilocin because of that low pH.
That's what people say.
Yes, I don't think anybody knows that. I don't think we haven't published this. But the answer is that that is not what's happening. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of things to say about this, because the lemon tech phenomenon, I do believe. I mean, the people on the internet, they're not out there trying to deceive us. There is something happening. Which is why it's fun to go and chase down and figure it out. Mm-hmm. But the thing that's happening is not the conversion of psilocybin into psilocin. So the reason that people are coming up faster, or whatever they say on lemon tech, is not because they convert the psilocybin into psilocin and therefore it's faster come up.
Do you think it could just be that they're ingesting a liquid instead of a solid mass, and it's just getting absorbed a little bit faster?
I will get there if you're patient with me. So first thing we did was we studied the hydrolysis of psilocybin and also all of these other prodrugs that we made at the full range of biological pH and temperature, right? So 37 degrees Celsius, and then you do the pH gambit, and that's how we know that psilocybin is not getting converted into psilocin by virtue of the pH in your stomach or of the lemon juice, because the half-life would be about 7 days. So that'd be a long time. So now we know that it must be an enzymatic conversion. So you have these non-specific esterases in your stomach that are going to do the conversion for you, and that's how you get to the psilocin that gives you the trip. So what's going on with lemon tech then? Because tens of thousands of Reddit users can't be wrong that the trip comes on faster and more intensely. So we have to explain that now. And I think that the answer there is that when you're blending up these magic mushrooms in lemon juice, the very acidic environment, you're effectively doing an aqueous acidic extraction of the magic mushroom material. So rather than throwing a handful of mushrooms into your stomach that need to be digested to release the psilocybin so that the psilocybin can get converted into the psilocin with the enzymes, you're extracting all of that material into the acidic kind of aqueous or water environment of the lemon juice, so that it's all out and it can all get worked on by your body immediately upon ingestion.
I see. Okay, and then it would naturally then hit you faster.
Yes, so it's just an extraction of the stuff from the mushrooms so that you have all this stuff available right away. It's not doing the conversion. Your body's still doing the conversion.
And what about the idea that, so famously psilocybin mushrooms, if you pick them up and you physically disturb them, they will often bruise blue.
Yes.
And this is taken as an indication of potency. What's true and not true there?
First, I want to say that this is brilliant work by Dirk Hoffmeister's lab again. So the blue that you see is it's the degradation of psilocin. So a couple of things are happening there. Start with psilocybin. When you bruise or hurt the mushroom, you're breaking up the cells and you're releasing the enzymes that are in the mushroom. So one of those enzymes is actually converting the psilocybin into psilocin. Right, it's very, very rapidly taking off that phosphate ester and turning it into the hydroxy group. And then in the presence of the oxygen here on Earth, that molecule is getting oxidized, and the psilocin is. And then as it's getting oxidized, the psilocin binds to another molecule of psilocin to make these dimers and oligomeric or polymeric degradation products from the psilocin, and it's that is blue.
So basically the psilocin clumps together, sticks together in essence, and that is creating that color. So the bluing would be an indication of the psilocin content of the mushroom, but the more blue that you see, the more psilocin is now unavailable for you if you were to ingest that.
It is a direct measure of how much of your drugs you just ruined, I think. And then there are other variables in there. There are some magic mushrooms that don't have the enzyme that do one of the conversions, and so therefore not all magic mushrooms bruise blue.
Okay.
But it is not showing you the psilocin. It's basically showing you the degraded, oxidized psilocin.
Yeah. So if we start to think about how do I put this? Okay, so you've got all these biotech companies trying to make quote unquote real drugs, pharmaceutical products that can be monetized out of something like psilocybin. So we talked about the Compass Pathways trials earlier. Let's say that they're successful. They want to give these things to people in the clinic. One sort of factor that comes into this and potentially limits the business potential there is the fact that mushrooms are pretty easy to grow. They grow wild in places like the Pacific Northwest and elsewhere, and people can get magic mushrooms very easily. They can get psilocybin. They can, in fact, we can go to the stores around here, and for those of you that don't live here, and I don't know how it is in other parts of the country, you can buy magic mushroom chocolate bars very, very easily out here. They're branded, they're packaged, and these things are all over the place. What do you think about that? Sort of just like the ease with which psilocybin and related things can be made by people in the so-called gray market or gray zones of commerce, and how often does that happen, and how is it going to interact with the quest to create pharmaceutical drugs?
Well, there's a lot there. I think that the quest to develop pharmaceutical drugs is going to become more divorced from magic mushrooms. I think that pharma is going to go do its pharma thing with purely synthetic molecules, and they're probably going to get rid of the trip. Because pharma wants to give you an orange bottle that you take home, and you don't need to sit in a clinic with eye shades and gentle music for however many hours. Yeah. Which means that there's the non-pharma products or drugs available. There, I do have a pretty strong opinion that go get mushrooms or grow your own mushrooms, because if you grow your own mushrooms, you know what you have, which is very, very important. See, for example, these chocolate bars you're talking about. Also, people have been taking magic mushrooms for thousands and thousands of years without any real incident. So the safety, element seems to be there, whereas, I wouldn't, be able to, I'm not recommending anything, but I wouldn't feel the same way about some dialkyltryptamine that I made in the lab that no one has ever taken before. Right. You're always sort of wondering, is there something I've overlooked here? Whereas with magic mushrooms that you grew in your fish tank at home, you're probably going to be okay.
So part of what you're doing at CaaMTech, right, is you are studying all of these molecules, you're creating new molecules, and then you're getting patents on these things. So so you own IP. You've created a lot of molecules, and you own the IP, yes?
Oh, yes. We are swimming in molecules and intellectual property. Mind you, all these molecules I just told you not to take. Go grow mushrooms.
Yeah. So, if we take, for example, the case of Alexander Shulgin, I'll assume people know who Shulgin is. If they don't, they can go look it up. But, Shulgin, he famously did all the Shulgin experiments that he did on his own, the sort of renegade guy. He created all these new molecules, and, somehow, some way, slowly but surely, some of these things at least started to leak out into the world. And then other people figured out how to make them, and, you can buy street drugs that are Shulgin molecules, to this day. Is that happening at all with some of these new research chemicals that you and others work on? Are they leaking out of the confines of the chemistry labs that you guys operate and getting out into the world at all?
I will start by saying that nothing gets out of our labs. We have a very strict policy at CaaMTech that we're not Alexander Shulgin. We don't taste the drugs. You refer to him as sort of a renegade. I think he's a wonderful scientist, a brilliant scientist, and I think the context for his work was just different from ours. Back then, you could eat the molecules. And he did a really nice job scientifically synthesizing, recording how to synthesize, and then his experience taking increasing amounts of them. And it's gratitude to Shulgin. That's why we know as much about the human pharmacology as we do, because otherwise it's tens of millions of dollars to get it into a human. Now to the chocolate bars. I think what has happened, and I don't know because I've only known about this I was shocked when I found out that there's billions of dollars of magic mushroom chocolate bars flying around the U.S. right now.
It's literally billions of dollars.
It's billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Which is actually kind of comforting in the sense that you don't hear about a lot of problems.
Right. Yeah,
so
I've never heard of one.
Right. There is.
I'm sure people have had bad trips.
There's been one problematic magic mushroom chocolate bar instance, and that's a company called Diamond Shrooms, which I think they're gone because I think the FDA went after them. And the problem there wasn't the magic mushrooms in the chocolate bars. The problem was that they were putting all sorts of other stuff in the chocolate bars, and that stuff was dangerous.
What was it? Do you know?
I don't remember. It was sort of like shaking mom's medicine cabinet.
Wow.
Like stuff like gabapentin was one of the things that jumped out at me. Like what? Why?
Yeah. Why would you? Yeah. They were trying to put something in there.
That makes you feel like you got your money's worth.
Yeah.
You know, in exchange for that greed, right? They killed a bunch of people.
Oh wow.
Which I mean, that's the problem.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's my agenda with that whole area in that, you know, at the very least, you need to tell the consumer what drugs they're getting and how much, right? Like, so don't lie.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the magic mushrooms. I think what happened was, and I can confirm this with a friend that I have who knows about the magic mushroom industry, of which we have nothing to do. As I understand it, magic mushroom chocolate bars were originally made with magic mushrooms in the chocolate.
Right.
And the industry could not even almost keep up with the supply. And so what do you do then? You know, you're a greedy capitalist and you want to keep selling your magic mushroom chocolate bars, but you can't grow enough mushrooms. Like, no freaking way, from what I understand.
Yeah.
What do you do next? I gave the answer earlier. It's that you would turn to another prodrug of psilocin to put into your magic mushroom chocolate bars. You would buy, a molecule very much like ours from China, or I don't think they make it in the U.S. I think it comes in from China, and you would put that in your magic mushroom chocolate bars, and you would call it psilocybin or magic mushroom chocolate bars, but you would really give this other prodrug.
Huh. So you could just buy in bulk psilocin prodrugs, like from China, and then mix them together in your chocolate bars.
Several years ago, this was true. We bought a lot of those we actually used them for science. Like in labs. We bought them as like actual research molecules, but there used to be a whole research chemicals market. And the quote research chemicals were really recreational drugs that you could buy on the internet. So you could buy, psilocin prodrugs. You could buy a whole bunch of these Shulgin molecules I was telling you about, where you change other parts of the molecules. And there was a whole racket there where there was a company called the Indol Shop. Here you go. We actually bought material from the Indol Shop, used it in one of our studies, cited the Indol Shop in our paper because, you have to write up your materials and methods. And then the Indol Shop put our paper on their homepage as some sort of validation for the quality of their their drugs. So, I don't know. But the bottom line there is that these magic mushroom chocolate bars, I don't think they're magic mushrooms anymore. They're something else.
I see. And it's a supply demand thing. The demand was so high that they simply could not grow actual psilocybin mushrooms, psilocybes, to keep up with that demand. And so they had to turn to this other method of finding these prodrugs, probably buying them in bulk and mixing them in.
Yes, and then it gets even more interesting. I think what happened then was that people got wise to particular prodrugs that were going into the magic mushroom chocolate bars. So now we're substituting in another psilocin prodrug for the magic mushrooms because I can't grow enough magic mushrooms, but I'm greedy and want to make money anyway and not disappoint my consumer. So I use another psilocin prodrug, but alas, now people are looking for that one because I've done it too much. And so now what you'll see is that these magic mushroom chocolate bar vendors are publishing certificates of analyses with particular psilocin prodrugs and showing that there's none of it.
Why are people looking for the particular one? Are they having slightly different experiences? What I don't understand.
That's a really good question.
Or do they just, is it like they just kind of latch on to a particular brand that happens to use one, and like what's going on there?
I think what's going on is that this is not entirely legal, right? Like let's take the molecule psilocytin, for example. Mm-hmm. So with psilocytin, you replace the 4-phosphate on psilocin or on psilocybin with an acetyl group. Much better prodrug, hydrolyzes really efficiently. So like I'll put this in my chocolate bar now, but now I'm selling millions of units of these and everybody's tripping balls, right? So there's no secret that these chocolate bars are psychedelic drugs, and somebody probably goes and figures out what's in there, and now the narcs are probably looking for psilocybin in the chocolate bars.
Right.
So what does the chocolate bar vendor do?
New one. Yeah. Okay, so it's like a cat and mouse thing. It's constant. Okay, that makes perfect sense. I mean, I think that does make perfect sense. But I guess so. The demand is just off the charts for psilocybin or psilocybin-like things, and people are just buying these chocolate bars everywhere.
Yes, and what blows my mind about that is that like I've been literally in this industry. Like I have the world's largest collection of psychedelic drugs, and I've hands down the largest patent portfolio for all these drugs, lots of published papers or whatever. And I had no idea this was going on until a few months ago.
How did you actually stumble into it?
When I really confirmed it, my partners were in town and they had heard about it, and they were like, well, like let's just go see, do you have a vape shop in town? I'd never been in a vape shop before. And so we went across town into this vape shop, and we went in there and asked to see the section, and the slightly suspicious person behind the counter showed us the cabinet filled with magic mushroom chocolate bars. And while we were asking whether these were popular, like 3 or 4 different sales of magic mushroom chocolate bars happened in front of us in like 20 minutes. And that was when we knew that this was sort of a thing.
Wow. And I guess I've had the thought in the back of my mind from time to time over the years of, I just see all of these vape shops everywhere I go. In Seattle and other cities, there's a lot of vape shops. And I think to myself, well, I know a lot of people vape. A lot of nicotine is a thing, and there's a lot of nicotine consumers out there. But it seems like there's even more vape shops that can be justified by that. And it seems like these shops are selling lots of things that lots of people want, not just nicotine and related products.
Yes, as I understand it, the majority of the vape shop profits are not from vape things.
So what else is in there besides magic mushroom products and vape products?
As it turns out, a lot of things in are very early on areas of scientific inquiry and patent portfolio. Some of these magic mushroom chocolate bars are actually a different kind of mushroom, Amanita muscaria, which is another psychedelic mushroom, but a very different variety.
Different. Yeah.
There are also there's a whole section of the vape shop for I think I say it correctly, Kratom or Kratom.
Yeah.
Very, very popular.
And what is Kratom for those that don't know?
So it is a leaf of a tree, and from I don't know how long ago until a few years ago, people would eat the leaf, grind up the leaf into a powder, make it into teas and stuff like that. And now you can see an analogy to cannabis happening here. And everybody was happy to have this tree leaf, and they would use it for energy or for pain or whatever it was that they were using it for in this very natural leaf or powdered form.
Yeah. And Kratom, I don't know a lot about like the pharmacology and the specifics, but people use Kratom for pain. It can have psychoactive effects. People, and it seems to be very dose dependent. People talk about taking different doses and it causes different effects. So not unlike cannabis in that respect either. And I believe it's an opioid related compound, but a lot of people say it's good for addiction or that help them get off of their opioid addiction. What do you know about that and what's going on there at the chemical pharmacological level?
Cool. So let's back up. And because we're talking about a leaf or a plant right now.
Yeah.
And we've got the same problem that happened in cannabis and happened in magic mushrooms, where kratom is this one molecule. It's not. There's a ton of alkaloids in the kratom plant, and this is going to become important in the next part of the story. But so the principal kratom alkaloid, or I don't know if I'm saying it right, is metragenine, and that represents about 2/3 or even higher of the overall alkaloid content of that plant. That molecule acts on the opioid system or opiate system. So it can be used for pain relief or euphoria or whatever people use that system for. I mean, most traditionally in pharmaceutical for pain relief. There has been a lot of progress understanding that molecule's pharmacology, as well as these minor alkaloids over the last, even like 3 or 4 years. That has given rise to a whole other section of the vape shop that has, I think, maybe even surpassed the Kratom category.
Okay, let's go there next. But so on Kratom, do you have any sense? I see a lot of Kratom signs in these shops.
Everywhere.
So this is another big seller. A lot of people are using this. What is your sense for the primary uses of it? Is it mostly for fun? Is it mostly for getting off of like pharmaceutical opioids? Like, how are people using this?
So I mean, it's hard to tell, right? Because the Kratom activists would tell you that like this is like, you know, the best thing that there is for people who are in pain and are trying to get off of the demonic pharmaceutical opiate products.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So it's
I know one person who has done it that way. They used Kratom and he was addicted to pills from a military-related injury, serious pain patient, and this was his path,
which is wonderful. Like I think that is a wonderful world that I would like to live in. There's the whole other side of it, that this noxious weed is just another way to get high, and everybody's getting addicted to Kratom, and we should do away with Kratom.
Yep. And do we know if it's addictive? Is it?
You know, based on everything that I've seen, I think that it's highly habit forming, and I think that this new era of products, which kind of takes minor alkaloids out of the leaf, and isolates them and provides them in isolated form or in high concentration. I think that those are amazingly habit forming, above and beyond even Kratom.
I see. So Kratom is a plant. There's lots of stuff in the plant. There's the principal alkaloid, which is metragenine. But then there's all these other things, and people have started extracting these, purifying these, concentrating them down, and now these are other products on the shelf in the vape shops?
Yes, you can go. So instead, it used to be, I think, that you could just buy leaf Kratom, or powdered leaf Kratom, or Kratom in capsules, or something like that. And now I think the more popular part of the Kratom section are it's pills or shots that look like 5-Hour Energy, or gummies, or other weird candy form things that have completely unnatural, engineered high ratios of these minor alkaloids.
I see. So these are natural compounds, but they're being concentrated and put together in combinations that are not found naturally in the plants.
Correct.
And I mean, this sounds like, obviously we probably don't know a lot here, except that it's happening. What are some of these things marketed as doing? What effects are they supposed to have?
Well, this industry, which I guess I would call the alternative products industry, and they have like trade shows. There's like a trade show called Champs I just learned about, where all of these alternative products people like get together with booths.
I'm not joking. I want to go and see what's going. Yeah.
Holy cow.
Yeah, let's go.
And I got to say, I've maybe sort of insinuated the negative side of this industry, in that, you know, these products, like at least the Kratom ones, the 7-hydroxymetragenine in particular, appear to be very habit forming. This industry is doing a lot of things right. You know, like if you look at, you know, some of these products, some of them look like drug products.
Yeah.
They're publishing certificates of analysis for the chemical composition. They're specifying specific amounts of the known compounds. So those are things I think
organically, basically, like they're not, you know, no regulators holding a gun to their head.
It's yeah, right. It's the Wild West, or a self-regulated industry, whichever one you want to call it. But unlike kind of legacy Kratom or you know, what you remember from cannabis and whatnot, you don't have to guess as to what strain this is and how much metragenine or how much of these minors there are. You can look on the box and read it.
So it's like the evolution of this little world happened much faster than, say, marijuana, where, you know, for decades and decades, the marijuana you bought from your marijuana guy was just whatever was in the bag. And now we live in this world where you can go get the particular strain in the particular box. And do you think that the fact that we've seen legal cannabis evolve the way that it has sort of caused that sort of expedited process to happen with these Kratom-like products?
Maybe. Yeah, I hadn't thought that through. I mean, I thought it was wonderful when the cannabis industry started putting on the packages the precise amounts of each of the cannabinoids, so that the consumer could, you know, make a decision.
I guess I'm just saying, like, there must be consumer demand for that stuff if they're doing it.
That's a great question. I know that there's enormous consumer demand for the isolated, really potent things.
Really?
And the numbers that I haven't given you here yet are that this 7-hydroxymetragenine stuff is somewhere on the order of, you know, 40 times more potent than morphine at the opiate receptors.
So it's having like classic opioid-like effects?
Yes, both analgesia and euphoria.
Yeah, so it's getting people high.
Yes, but then the other side of that one is that it might also be really, really effective at treating people's pain.
Yeah. Which, right, okay, so now, this brings us to the world of, okay, this stuff is relatively unregulated. No one really knows much about it, except that people want it because it's having these effects. Is it good that it's out there and this is happening because it's an alternative to fentanyl? Something that pops into my head here is, I didn't know this was happening until you told me, and I'm not hearing about like a bajillion people dying from overdosing. So, like, how do you see this maybe playing out here?
So I think there's 0 overdoses right now. I think that number, and I tell my kids, right, like, I don't like the words like none or all,
right?
Because like there's got to be one. We've looked around, and I don't think that there is a single overdose of 7-hydroxymetragenine or its rearrangement product, pseudoindoxil.
So naively, if you would have told me, hey, there's a compound out there that's unregulated that gets people high, it's 40x more potent, give or take, than morphine, and lots of people are taking it, I would just assume people are dying at some rate from this, but it's not obvious that's happening, to put it that way. So, like, there might be something very interesting going on here from a scientific perspective.
Yes, and it also gets to the words that you used just a minute ago, like good or bad.
Right.
Like, is this good or bad? Like, whenever I hear those words, I'll talk about what I teach my kids again. I always think like, oh, who am I to judge, right? And here, like, the good or bad, I think it depends, right? Because this could be insanely great if the fentanyl users in downtown Seattle that are wobbling all over the place decide, like, what, instead of smoking this stuff, I don't know what it is, off of a piece of foil, like, I'm gonna buy myself a bottle of 7-hydroxymetragenine, and I'll know exactly what I'm getting, and I won't die. And not only that, like, the doctor will know exactly what I took because I can show the doctor the package, who can match it up with the lab results and everything. That sounds wonderful, right? And nobody should be saying anything wrong about this industry ever again. The other side of that one would be like, do we really need another opioid epidemic?
Right.
Right, like in a few years, are we going to have a whole bunch of like 7-hydroxymetragenine addicts walking around the street? Yeah,
it's important to remember too. Like, right, the opioid epidemic took years to play out. It wasn't like one day people started smoking fentanyl and dying. It was kind of a slow burn in a sense. Yeah. Wow. So like this makes sense of the thought that I shared earlier. It's like, why do I see all these vape shops? It seemed like there was too many that could be explained by the nicotine, and there's this whole universe that is billions of dollars of commerce.
Yeah, see, I mean, I didn't even pick up on what you just said because I just see everybody vaping all the time, and I'm like, okay, well, that's that. But yeah, this whole industry, right? I mean, I think we looked into it, and these are rough numbers, right? But we've estimated sort of the Kratom 7-hydroxy kind of market to be around $5 billion a year. Can't confirm this, right? Because like, nobody's sharing their books with us. But
but order of magnitude, it's in that neighborhood.
That'd be a great pharmaceutical drug, wouldn't it?
Right. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So it's literally a whole industry. So all these vape shops, it's a whole, what you call the alternatives industry. It's a whole suite of different products that are, I mean, how would you describe this? These are ingestible compounds that have recreational and or medicinal effects that people use as an alternative to pharmaceuticals.
Yes. Yeah. That sounds about right. I was sort of down on just last week I was speaking to a friend and, kind of down on the whole going through loopholes and like trying to, find ways around. But it was pointed out to me that that's kind of American innovation, right? Like finding a way.
Yeah.
Like, and then finding a way, and then like, does it all come crashing down on you, or do you get to stay there?
Right.
And that seems to be the story of a lot of American innovation. And so here, with this whole huge industry, I think that the jury is still out and probably will be for a while. What dawns on me is that it would be really nice for the industry to do just a few simple things to maybe, if you were phrasing it to them, to sort of guarantee their success and longevity, not getting shut down.
Yeah. What would those things be?
So again, just a couple months of studying, but these are the things that bother me. The thing can't look like it's something for kids, and that's why I say the 7-hydroxy industry, for the most part, this is a blister pack pill in a white box.
Yeah.
I show these things to my kids, and they're like, yeah, I wouldn't confuse that with candy. Whereas go to the psychedelic chocolate bars, like, oh, Fruity Pebbles chocolate bar. Like,
Right,
geez,
right.
Careful where you put that, Mom. Not my wife, by the way. But there are other things that I think across the board, and you can see why it's the greed again in the 7-hydroxy market. They're all doing putting more than one dose or one serving in a pill, right? And so, like, if you look at all these products carefully, like they'll have tablets or pills, and then they'll tell you that like one tablet has 4 servings. And the reason that they're doing this is basically like, you confuse the consumer and you pop one tablet because you're used to one tablet being one serving.
Right.
And now you've gotten hit with 4 servings of this very, very potent thing for the first time. You just did heroin. I mean, you didn't really do heroin, but you get really hit hard with this overwhelming euphoria. You're probably more likely to go back.
Right. Wow.
So I think that that's something that needs to go away. So I mean, like
that is happening.
Oh yeah, you'd be hard pressed, I think, to find a 7-hydroxy tablet with one serving in it.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think a very easy thing here for that industry would be standardize what a serving is, and then put no more than one serving in a tablet. You can sell more tablets in the bottle, but
right.
A tablet should be a serving.
Wow.
Same with the shots, right? You buy a 5-hour energy shot. How many servings do you think that is? It's 1. Right?
Yeah.
You buy a 7-hydroxymetragenine shot. How many servings in there? Like 4.
Wow.
So you throw it back, and then you're nodding.
Wow. And I have no sense for like how all of the different regulators that might care about this actually like come to care about it and do something about it or not. Like, are regulators inclined to go in that direction, or is this likely not going to be touched for a while? Like, do you have any sense for that stuff?
So fascinating. Right, because like, so what does it take to get on this is the FDA?
Yeah,
FDA's radar, right? Like harm, right? Like so, like I mentioned, diamond shrooms earlier. FDA chased after diamond shrooms because people died.
People died.
But what did I just say about the 7-hydroxy?
Yeah,
right.
No one seems to be dying.
Like, FDA's kind of I can't speak for FDA, but like I'd imagine they're kind of like I don't see it here, guys. There are. The legacy Kratom folks are lobbying really, really hard to get rid of this really dangerous and addictive 7-hydroxy, and there's also a rearrangement product of that that's even stronger, pseudoindoxil. Get rid of that. It's a threat to Kratom. It's a threat to the nation and its health and everything like that. But then again, like if I were working at FDA, I would ask for more information about all of the dying.
Yeah, interesting. So. These aren't scientific observations from clinical trials, obviously. These things appear not to be super deadly, at least, because no one's obviously dying, it seems, at least not yet.
Empirically, yeah.
But you said they also do seem to have some kind of addictive potential and be pretty habit-forming, and certainly the companies making these things are irresponsibly dosing people, probably for the very reason that it's causing a habit to form and therefore driving business.
According to me. Yeah,
According to you.
I think that it is across the line to put more than one serving of a habit-forming thing into a pill, because I think the consumer's going to pop a pill.
Right,
just like
of course.
to take a shot.
Yeah.
Don't buy me, don't give me a chocolate chip cookie and tell me that it's 2 servings.
Is there any way for this to play out other than, the FDA comes in or whoever and says, this is the way it's going to be, or we're shutting you down? Or, some people start dying because, the people running these businesses are not going to start self-regulating their dosing. Is there any way that a responsible steward could shape the evolution of all this stuff?
Yeah, so I think and this is according to me after looking at it for a whole 5 months, right? Take that with a grain of salt. I think that basically, like, FDA does some things really, really well, right? If you look at the whole clinical trial system, you're ultimately looking at the cost cost benefit analysis, right, of the drug. Like, does the therapeutic benefit outweigh the potential for harm? And addiction would be a kind of harm. And so here, if you apply that sort of high level philosophy to this industry, what is the harm? Let's get a good understanding of that. And then also, what's the benefit, right? Because, like, let's not pull something off the shelves that a lot of former heroin addicts are relying on to stay clean. Right. That would be bad.
Yeah.
It would also be bad to pull something that's pretty like I said, they're doing a lot good, a nice thing that's being self-regulated, at least to a certain quality control standard. Let's not pull that off the shelves and have it disappear into the gray market where it starts to look like fentanyl on foil in Seattle again.
Yeah.
And so I think ultimately, like, the answer, and I'm very, very biased here, the answer is more science. Like, let's get our hands around the actual potential for harm and the actual potential for therapeutic benefit. And then from there, kind of figure out what to do.
Yeah. Who makes all this stuff? Where are the manufacturers? Like what do they look like, and how does that even work?
I do not know specifically. I understand that there is a relatively small number of manufacturers, and they're producing enormous quantities of the stuff. But there is no regulation here, right? Because Kratom's a plant, right? And it's like been used in teas and stuff for a long time. So I think that the government would be sort of hesitant to, come out of nowhere and say like, oh, we're going to take this plant away from you.
Yeah.
And this is where there's a lot of tension between the legacy Kratom folks and like the 7-hydroxy folks, in that they feel that isolating this minor alkaloid or causing it to occur from metragenine is going to ruin the whole Kratom industry for them. They want to preserve this wonderful, holistic, botanical Kratom by preventing these newcomers from selling the minor alkaloids.
Yeah. And, to some extent, you can take that argument at face value. To some extent, it's probably people just having turf wars for business and fighting over shelf space.
With truth mixed in with it, which makes it hard to decipher.
Right. Wow. Fascinating. Well, I'm gonna look at that CHAMPS conference and just see what that world even looks like.
I think it would be a really fun trip. I unfortunately can't go to the next one, but I really want to go.
When is it?
Check it out. It's also where you'd find like Delta 8, right? Like
all that stuff. Yep.
I think I saw a post on LinkedIn where like Delta 8 was the thing of 2 years ago, and now it's 7-hydroxy. So this is the new hotness.
Yep. Yep.
And the time right now is super interesting, right? Because there's a lot of folks lobbying for legislative change to get rid of 7-hydroxy. Of course, you got to thread a needle there because there is some 7-hydroxy in your Kratom. So then you have to start talking about like, well, what is an appropriate amount? Like, what does nature really make? But of course, just like cannabis, it's kind of variable.
Right.
So like, will the legacy Kratom people like limit the amount that can be in there, but then go and breed something that's the new hotness and crosses the line that they created for themselves?
Yeah.
It's fun.
Wow. Yeah, there's so many analogies to the marijuana world, right? You've got the people that are all about the whole plant and it being natural, and then, people start making concentrates, and all of these different little cultures emerge and products, start to sprout up. And it's a never-ending cycle because everyone loves novelty and the new thing. Like every year there's a new cannabis strain of the year. And it sounds like in this world too, it's like everyone is constantly looking for the next thing.
Oh man, it's funny. Like, not me. Like I told you, I've been listening to Fish shows from 2017 for the last week, right? Like I told you, like if you want psychedelics, like why don't you go grow some magic mushrooms?
Yeah.
I read the same books over and over again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Oh, do you do that? You read the same books more than once?
Oh yeah, I've been a really good friend of mine gave me the Count of Monte Cristo at the beginning of the year, and I've just been reading it in circles ever since.
Yeah, I do that too. I don't necessarily intentionally do it, but like I will often go back and read books that I read when I was much younger. And I know that I'm going to absorb it and notice things in a very different way today than I did 5, 10, 15 years ago. I love doing that.
For me, that was Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance.
Yeah.
When I read it as a young person, I thought that the father was like this idealistic, stoic, Zen-like philosopher. Reading as a parent, I'm like, dude, like your kid is having like psychological issues, and you're like, being a stoic with him, like, give the kid a hug, like what's wrong with you? So it's like complete 180 on that book for me.
Wow. What is the Count of Monte Cristo about? Actually, I've never read it, but I've heard about it multiple times.
Oh wow. So it's a really great guy, young person, 19 years old, who is just coming into his career. He's going to get promoted to be a captain on a ship.
And this is like hundreds of years ago?
1800s, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And a beautiful girl is, now that he's going to be the captain of the ship, he can afford to get married to this beautiful girl, and his life is set. But people who are jealous of him and looking to get ahead betray him, and he goes to prison and is tortured for 15 years. During the period of this torture, he encounters a person that basically bestows upon him infinite knowledge through teachings, and then ultimately tells him where there's a treasure, so that when he escapes from prison, he has infinite knowledge and infinite wealth to carry out his revenge. Right? So you have a highly motivated person looking to carry out vengeance with unlimited resources. And then the book is how this, very elaborate plan all unfolds and everything like that. And then, the reason I love the book so much is that still not a good idea, right? Like, which is why I say that, Jesus is the GOAT here, right? In that forgiveness is still the answer. Even if you have unlimited resources and unlimited knowledge, no matter how much somebody has wronged you, forgiveness is really probably the only answer. And that's what the Count of Monte Cristo learns.
Wow. Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like a very archetypal or almost biblical story. And the way I've come to understand some of the things that you were just pointing to is, religions are very much related to how society functions and how it's regulated and how it either persists or doesn't. Mm-hmm. And people always want to get ahead. We're always in competition with each other. People can be very jealous and vengeful. And unless you build in social mechanisms and customs to counteract those tendencies, it leads to like runaway disaster and social disintegration, because people are going to try and one-up each other and kill each other and seek vengeance and all that stuff.
Yeah, here's where I really like Alfred Adler. It was like Freud, Adler, and Jung.
The psychologist.
Yeah. To try to go through life with the perspective of loving and respecting everyone as your comrade, right? And you can kind of get there by thinking about like, whoa, like we're on this rock in the middle of freaking nowhere, flying around like this star. Isn't it nice to have other Homo sapiens around to like check in with and be like, hey, like I'm glad you're there. And if you can kind of get yourself in that mindset when you see another human being of being like, hey, like I'm glad you're there, like another human being on this rock. At least for me, like I worry a little bit less about like whether you took my parking spot.
Right. Yeah. Like defaulting to that tit for tat, giving people the benefit of the doubt mindset. Mm-hmm. So you spend a lot of time reading fiction. I've learned that about you since I've known you. So you're a chemist, but you read a lot of fiction.
I do. I've got a lot of friends who are English majors who give me some good recommendations. And then a while back, like I think it was Tim Ferriss recommended like reading fiction before bed, like if you have trouble sleeping.
Yeah.
Like so, I tended to read fiction before bed to kind of put my mind in a state that allowed me to kind of drift off to sleep. And I like it. It's like a break.
Yeah.
Like I was talking to a bunch of friends just the other day that like even when I'm listening to music, I wind up thinking about science and like, writing chemical structures and reactions and stuff. And then, people ask me what I thought about like the set of the show that I was listening to. And I was like, oh man, I almost didn't hear it. So it's like, I have a tendency to gravitate towards that kind of nonfiction material. So like reading fiction and letting my mind get there, like, I find it to be, relaxing.
Yeah. I don't read as much fiction as you, but maybe I should, because when I gravitate towards nonfiction stuff and science stuff, obviously, and it's very activating. So sometimes I might read a nonfiction science book before bed, and now I'm like, my mind is just buzzing. Yeah,
I'll get to work tired, and I'll sit down and start looking at something, and some paper or something will come up, and like all of a sudden, like I feel like super stimulated. But there was no difference between me 5 minutes ago and me after reading that thing. But I often say that like the most powerful drug for me is like a new idea, or being the first to know something, or the first to figure something out.
Yeah. What so if we go back and to psychedelic science stuff, and we take a bird's eye view, what's your overall just impression? I know that there's no final answer here, but what's your overall impression on where things are going with respect to this idea that we're going to create drugs that retain their psychotherapeutic value but don't have the trip and the hallucinations. And specifically what I mean is drugs that work for major psychiatric conditions for which other medications have generally not worked. People who have severe depression or PTSD have tried the things that are already out there. Those things don't work. Do you think the trip is an important component of psychedelics, MDMA, and these types of things? Or do you think we will plausibly successfully engineer out those so-called side effects?
It's going to be both, and we already have.
Yep.
So there's a company, Transneural, which is a CaaMTech spin-out led by Charmaine Likens, and I can connect you with her. They are developing serotonin 2A agonists with no HTR. These are purely synthetic pharmaceutical-looking molecules going down a very pharmaceutical-like path, and I think that those are going to be an absolute breakthrough for the pharmaceutical industry, not the psychedelic industry. The psychedelic industry is something entirely separate, and then I think that the therapeutic areas where those are going to be useful, and they already have cool data for depression, but those therapeutic areas, it's going to be kind of context dependent, right? So I think certain things that we're trying to treat in the patient, you're going to need the trip, right? Like if I need you to make a new connection, and if I need you to have an epiphany or a realization, you might need that psychedelic experience where you lose your default mode network. If I'm trying to get you to be super open and have a real deep connection with another person, maybe couples counseling, like an entactogen or something like MDMA might be the right drug. So you might need that experience. But I also think that there's a lot of stuff that can be treated probably way more than we even appreciate by just serotonin 2A agonism without the psychedelic trip. So it's kind of like not a black or white thing, but context dependent.
Such as what?
For which?
A lot of things that we can treat with 2A agonism but without the psychedelic trip.
How about a migraine headache?
Yeah.
Right, like you don't need to see geometric patterns to treat your migraine headache.
Yeah.
But a lot of folks would tell you that a psychedelic drug will help with your cluster headache or migraine headache. Right. You maybe now right now maybe you have to choose between a psilocybin mushroom trip at work, right, or a migraine headache. I don't know what I would choose. I'd probably go the psilocybin experience because I've heard migraines are terrible. But what if you could just get rid of the migraine headache and this isn't the right context for a psychedelic trip?
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Some things are going to require a trip in the way that I think about that is, if you need to do couples counseling with your husband or wife, or you've got some severe trauma you're dealing with that's related to your PTSD, the circuits need to rewire themselves and different dynamics need to come out of that, and that probably corresponds to the symbolism you see in your trip or what the MDMA is enabling you to talk about and re-narrativize with your spouse and things like that. But as you said, something like a migraine headache, this could be purely a vasoconstrictive thing that doesn't require any of those dynamics.
Absolutely. And then the other thing that we didn't mention, but you just made me think about it, was sort of the, and you hear a lot of these words here, the neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, neurite outgrowth, dendritic spine formation and all that. So that's something that probably doesn't require the trip, right? To put your biology into a state where new connections are facilitated, right? And so, the most popular way of doing that is with these psychedelic drugs. You have this amazing experience that you never forget, and you have these epiphanies, and you make these new connections or whatever, and you can kind of point to the neurite outgrowth piece of that. You might be able to subtract the trip out of that and do something deliberate, right? So it's like, I'm going to go to this, piano camp for, this is a hypothetical, I don't have a piano camp, but go to piano camp for a week, and I'm going to take the serotonin 2A agonist that has been shown in the in vitro assays to lead to the most neurite outgrowth, and then maybe I can finally learn how to play the piano because I'm in a state where my neurons are more susceptible to learning and making new connections. I think that area. Not a lot of work being done in it. I think it's fascinating, cognitive enhancement.
Yeah. Interesting. What so as someone, so you've got the science background, but you're in, you've got your startup. Given what you do, and given what sort of in my head right now are some of the things that I saw in the marijuana industry as a science guy who went into the private sector and then saw everything play out. I saw the booms and busts and how sort of the R&D was affected by the business and all this stuff. When we think about how much capital has come into the psychedelic space, when we think about, you know, the clinical trials that people are doing, all the stuff that people are gunning after, and then you look at the science, the academic science that has been done. And these two things are becoming entangled to some extent, right? There's academic scientists running labs at universities who also have like startups trying to make, you know, new drugs and things like that. Do you think the science is being contaminated at all on the academic side by the exuberance that is psychedelic science, or has been the last few years?
Not ours. Just like we don't eat the drugs.
Yeah.
You know, and our group does, you know, have concerns with, you know, some data.
Published data that's out there.
Right. But I mean, that's kind of the nice thing about the scientific process is you can go and repeat those experiments. There have been a couple of occasions where I've called up the scientist and been like, you know, hey, your conclusion's wrong because you didn't look at the data from time equals 0 to time equals 30.
Yeah.
And the answer was like, oh, geez, yeah, you're right. And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right. Like
yeah.
making a mistake. I mean, I keep mentioning my kids, right? Like I tell them no one makes more mistakes than dad. Like I make mistakes all the time. And I think you have to be willing to make mistakes in order to innovate or to try new things or whatever, like totally forgivable. I've heard, but not experienced, you know, fraud, right? Like we're going to fake that data point so that we can get the paper into Nature.
Right.
I think that ought to be like criminal. But I mean, then again, you know, I hold science up to a very high regard. And I'd like to think that the scientific process will be able to, you know, fix those sorts of errors too. You know, if you're caught, you know, with fraud, you don't get funding anymore, and you know your reviewers will never publish or never let your papers through again. Plus, like in theory, other people can repeat your experiments and, you know, explain the differences in data and whatnot.
Do you think are there to put it another way? Do you think, you know, a lot of the high profile work that's been published lately? Are you seeing any hints of slop or major results that you don't think will hold up in the end?
I have not come across anything that I felt is deliberate fraud. And now I kind of wonder, well, like, what would be my responsibility if I were to see that? You know, I think we'd probably try to repeat the experiment, and like, I would want to point it out. But then in the other example I gave you, like, yeah, I've seen mistakes. And, you know, like I try to treat those mistakes in a very collegial way, just like I would want to be treated, because like I said, I make a lot of mistakes. So, I mean, I like to think all the scientists are doing their best, right? I'm not sure about, you know, kind of the, psychedelic boom inspired private science. Like I have no idea. You know, and again, like I work with, you know, almost exclusively academic scientists whose careers and reputations and jobs are on the line, right? So it's like, you know, in the worst case scenario, there's a mistake. It's not sloppy. It's an honest mistake that anybody would make. Yeah.
So what do you think, what do you see as like sort of the future of CaaMTech and what you're doing? Do you just want to have this sort of sandbox to play in forever, or do you see it sort of following a particular trajectory as a company?
I guess, I use the analogy designing an airplane in mid-flight kind of a thing, and I think that has been something at CaaMTech that has really served us well. That if we had done exactly what we said we were going to do when there was money flying the goal, you know, when we raised money was basically spend it as quickly as possible so we can grab another pile of money, because there's money everywhere, and that's how we're going to get ahead. And I think that through our hard conversations and the hard decisions that we've made, to like, you know what, maybe we don't spend money on that until we see this. That's been one of the strongest things about the company, that in what was the psychedelic, or still is the psychedelic industry, there's no company in that industry that is more responsible and efficient with your money than CaaMTech. So like at a high level, that's sort of, I think, become our brand, in that we're very efficient with how we do science, what science we do, the decisions we make. I mean, you're sitting in my office right now, like, you know, let me know if you think this is palatial.
No, it's a nice little cozy office. It looks like a PhD student's like bedroom.
There you go.
Or something like that.
But we try to play the cards on the table nimbly, as they come to us. And like I said, this psychedelic chocolate bar and Kratom industry is news to us now.
Yeah.
But there's a ton of money over there. And there are some changes that need to be made over there. And, by chance, we have the intellectual property that covers those industries. And so maybe go and play around over there a little bit and see if we can...
You might be able to, in effect, regulate what's going on.
I always hesitate, for very good reasons, to like walk into a room and be like, hey, this is how it's going to be done now, because like, what do I know? Like, hey, who's the new guy?
Yeah, but incentives can be tweaked.
Yes. Yeah. And I think in a collegial way, hopefully establish some relationships with experts in the industry who are like-minded in that, like, we don't want kids taking these things.
Yeah.
And, maybe we agree to some standards and then, get a good group of folks together that all agree to some quality control standards, and then place the incentive there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fascinating conversation, dude. Like, what you're doing is very interesting.
Thank you.
The fact that you've been able to tie your chemistry with the patent law and create this little space is, it's been kind of fascinating to watch this from a distance.
Thank you. I have a friend, Miranda, who, she was like my coach years and years ago. She used to call it following my nose. Yeah. And one of the things in our, sort of coaching relationship was, her encouraging me to follow my nose more.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that you came up with a way to, use the private sector and what it's good at to help scientists do their work. I mean, for anyone who knows anything about academic science and what you have to go through to write the grants and get the money, like that, that must be fantastic for those researchers.
I hope so, and it is probably the best part about the job. Yeah, like the best part of the job is, I mean, like I said, I came from academic chemistry where, there was not a lot of money in the lab. Like, we thought twice about buying a new NMR tube, maybe even 3 times. And the ability, to have a skill that generates assets that, allow us to raise money that we can distribute to the scientists, many of whom I actually worked with during my PhD. I think that's probably the most rewarding thing about the job is supporting science. Yeah.
Is there anywhere people can go to kind of like follow along the research that you're doing or you're tied to or anything like that?
I mean, I guess you can Google my last name and then, in like Google Scholar, and that'd probably get like the most recent papers. The patents are in Google Patents, but they're far less exciting. They, read like a phone book. Our CaaMTech webpage, we post updates every now and again, but we tend not to do a lot of that because we're too busy doing the actual work than talking about it all. So it's like, here you go. Like, this is probably the first interview or media conversation that I've had in years. Because, otherwise I'd be, looking at the data that's over on that table.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks very much for your time, Andrew.
Thank you.
Cool stuff. Visit mindandmatter.substack.com to find all of my content. Hey everyone, I want to take just a minute to tell you about a really cool health monitoring device I've been using called Lumen. It's a handheld, pocket-sized device with a sleek design. The Lumen device measures CO2 levels in your breath, which allows their technology to determine the extent to which your body is burning fats versus carbohydrates. Lumen helps improve your metabolic flexibility, your body's efficiency in shifting between using fats and carbs for energy. I use this device in the morning or before bed or after meals or after workouts to track my metabolism. With just a couple weeks of use, I learned a lot about which foods were causing my body to burn mostly fat, mostly carbs, or both, as well as how long I needed to fast and how hard I needed to exercise to promote fat burning. Being able to track whether your body is burning fat versus carbs will help you figure out how your body responds to your lifestyle and whether or not your weight loss and fitness strategies are actually working. Lumen is great for anyone looking to optimize their health for either weight loss or athletic athletic performance. Their easy-to-use app allows you to track your results together with what you're eating and how you're exercising, and it syncs with other devices like the Apple Watch. Click the link in the episode description to learn more and use the code MINDMATTER, MINDMATTER, to get 10% off your Lumen device today. That's on top of the site-wide sale they are currently running, and the Lumen device is eligible to be paid for with FSA and HSA health accounts. Check out the link in the episode description for more info.